Welcome, everyone, to the DadDHD podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I am Shane Thrapp of Creating Order from Chaos.
And I'm Braden of Empower ADHD Solutions.
All right, everyone, we're going to get into something pretty deep today. How many of you dads out there have spent your entire life performing a version of yourself that's not really you? And I don't mean like putting on a nice shirt for a job interview. I mean like that, pretending to be someone you're not every single day, because at some point you've learned that the real you wasn't acceptable. That's masking. And if you're a neurodivergent dad, there's a really good chance that you've been doing it so long that you don't even know where the mask ends and you begin. Today, we're going to be talking about masking for dads, the pressure to appear normal, to never ask for help, to be the unshakable rock for your family, while your brain is running 15 tabs with sound on. We're going to talk about how that pressure doesn't really just wreck us, it trickles down to our kids. Because when we mask, we accidentally teach them to mask too. And that cycle, that's the one we need to break.
We're also getting into masking in our relationships because you can mask at work, mask in public, whatever. But when you're masking with the person you share a bed with, that's a different kind of lonely. And most of us don't even realize we're doing it. But here's the thing. We're not going to sit here and tell you masking is always bad. It's not. It's a tool. The problem is when it stops being a choice and starts being the only way we know how to exist. So let's get into it.
I mean, man, like society really tells us a lot of times that we've got to have it together. I don't know about you, like Braden, like you and I, our childhood, we've talked about it a lot. Like my dad, like there's plenty of cases where, he would just tell me, like, you cannot show your weakness to others. I remember my dad would like be that quintessential stereotype, like when my mom would say, "Hey, we're lost," and he would like, "I ain't asking for directions," right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like I know that for me, it broke down into having all of these just standard one-liner sayings that really equated to don't bother me all the time. And things like we're running late. Well, if you're waiting on me, you're backing up, that kind of stuff or whatever, which I look back on and it's funny, but at the same time, it also was just repetitive. And I was taught to just hide my emotions. Children should be seen and not heard. And so I learned to just say, I'm fine. And that became like my default answer whenever someone would ask me a question.
Right, because like it's so hard to express these things. Like I always think of that phrase that's out there: "I'm fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotionally damaged." When I hear "I'm fine," that's where my brain goes into because that pressure to appear neurotypical honestly isn't just like external. When we say those things, it's honestly because we've internalized a lot of this stuff so deeply. In that moment, when we're saying I'm fine, like legitimately, we're just saying that because we don't know how to really express actually how we're feeling at the moment. I love it because whenever I wanted to create my business, I was like, I'm going to be able to do this stuff. I'm going to be able to be the marketer. I'm going to be able to do the social media. I'm going to be able to do all of these different parts of my business. And like, oh man, I cannot tell you how many of those self-help CEO books that I read that were just like they were talking about like I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I did it all by myself. And like ignoring the whole fact that all of these CEOs and successful people out there have a team of people helping them function. And I was like, when I found that out, and also Alan Brown, thank you so much for that. One of the things that he actually taught me is that there's a team of people out there that always helps us and supports us that makes us who we are. And we don't take that into consideration when we're trying to start the businesses or the things that we do. We just think that we're supposed to do it all by ourselves. And honestly, it's one of the biggest reasons why I see so many of my clients struggling and failing is because they're trying to do so much of this stuff by themselves.
Yeah, society really teaches us to not ask for help. And that becomes a real problem growing up and becoming adults because then we don't know when we need help, and we end up just burning out and failing over and over and over again because of that. And at some point, we need to learn to focus also on our own support systems. I'm going to add in there that it also teaches us to look for the strengths in others as well, including our kids.
Yeah. And hell, that we are the provider expectation, like that's actually the biggest root of, I think, where a lot of my biggest things were, was like my father was really hardcore in, you've got to be the provider, you've got to be the person that is bringing the money in, and regardless of how you feel about things. And honestly, like, in today's age, like in gender equality, we kind of have to acknowledge, like, that's not true. There's no way for a single income to be able to provide for most families. It's just not realistic, you know. And I think that mindset, though, is still there, and it forces us to perform externally because the people depend on us when we are just self-destructing internally. And that gap between how we feel and how a lot of us present is legitimately where burnout it lives. And when burnout really starts to keep moving forward and we keep forcing ourselves through it, it becomes a brain injury. It becomes a legitimate issue that will cause physiological damage to our bodies and our minds.
And that burnout can really start to affect our relationships as well. And this is where masking does the most damage and where we talk about it the least. You can mask at work and mask in public and mask around even friends, although you shouldn't have to. But when you're masking at home with the person that you spend the most time with and the person who should know you the most, then that's a whole different kind of lonely, because then you're not even yourself when you should be the most yourself.
Yeah, this is a big one for me because, like, in my first relationship, I masked. I mean, let's be real about this one. Masking is a lifetime thing. It's something that we learn as a self-defense mechanism as a child. But I remember, like, I would catalog people's laughs because when they laughed, other people would be like, they would find whatever it was that they would, we were laughing about funny or funnier, I guess, to me. And with the way that I developed my social skills through like body language and things like that, I categorized everybody's nuances and like put them into a little library in my head as to what is socially appropriate. So I would steal people's mannerisms constantly. And I built up this library of personas of who I could be in any given moment with whoever I was around. So I became a social chameleon. I hear a lot of guys in the group talk about, I'm a social chameleon. No, you're an excellent masker. And that's okay. Like, we're going to talk about why that's a good thing at the end. But whenever we're dealing with our relationships and things of that nature, there's a lot of harm that can come from that. Like, when we first get into the relationships and we're developing our dating profile and we put what we expect people to be attracted to, and we meet the person and we like try to perform to that expectation, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. Because the person that we're with, if we're with them for a significant amount of time and they start to develop feelings, they're not developing feelings for you, they're developing feelings for the mask that you put on.
Yeah, and masking your needs doesn't make you easier to live with. Eventually, it's all going to come out. I liken it to having to pee, right? Because you can hold it for so long, but eventually it's going to come out whether you want it to or not, and whether it's the appropriate moment or not. So you can say you're fine when you're overstimulated or you're trying to decompress from work or any of that, but then eventually that all builds up and you're just going to explode and snap.
Yeah, because that emotional masking really does kill intimacy, especially if you've been masking things. And this is something that I learned not just about myself, but other people, especially in relationships when I was really trying to explore and understand those different things, was my sexuality, my desire for sex is not the status quo. I don't really care about sex after a certain amount of time. It just doesn't really mean anything to me. It's great at the beginning, and I love it, and I think sex is awesome. I'm not like asexual or anything like that, but for me, sex is just like an aspect of a relationship that eventually just isn't as important as it is to other people. But I would try to force myself into those situations where I would try to perform even though I wasn't really into it anymore. Not that I wasn't into the person, right? It's because I wasn't really into sex anymore. And like that killed so many relationships for me because invariably I would say the dumb. I'm kind of bored with this. No woman or man wants to hear, I'm bored with this. That is, I'm going to tell y'all right now, not the thing to say. And there's no coming back from saying it like, I'm bored with this. And like, no, 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 not you. That's not going to fly. I need y'all to understand that conversation is not going to work ever again. But I do need to make sure everybody understands, like, everybody has different sex drives, and sex drives are different throughout the relationship. And especially when you're dealing with ADHD, and especially when you're dealing with autism and like sensory issues. I love Kate Osborne, Katiosaurus. She talks about like the different smells and the different senses and the things like that are going on during sex. Like another thing that you can't say to a person is like, I'm really having a strong issue with the smell that I'm having to deal with. It's not you, it's me. Does not cover that conversation after that point. By the way, just to let all of you know. But it's not like there was anything wrong with it in the situation that like there was something wrong with that person. It's just I was dealing with an overabundance of sensory issues, and smell was like really fucking with me that day. And like, there's no coming back from that conversation either, y'all, just to let you know. And when we mask these things and we don't have these conversations when it's appropriate, like, hey, I just need you to let you know I have sensory issues. And sometimes sense of smell is really rough for me. And sex has a lot of different things going on. Like, these are conversations that need to be had not mid coitus. They need to be kind of like outside the conversation where everybody's calm and you can actually express and explain where you're coming from. Like, I have autism, I have sensory issues. Sometimes those sensory issues are this. I have ADHD. Sometimes my brain does some really screwed up things whenever I'm in the middle of things I should be focusing on. So it's really important to understand, like, when we're having these conversations, that overwhelm can lead us to have these impulsive things where we say something really stupid in the moment that is legitimately going to kill the relationship going forward.
Which leads to an important point. You don't want to unmask all at once. That's not like a one-time thing where it's just, hey, this is all of me. You don't let that all spill out. You need to let it come out slowly. Because could you imagine if you had been masking your entire relationship and just suddenly you decided to unmask mid coitus?
No, I have. Yes. Why, yes, I can imagine that
Oh,
because
okay,
I've been
okay.
there.
Point taken. But it's definitely something that needs to happen like over time, right? So you kind of ease people into it. And preferably, hopefully you've done this before you've been married or together for years and years and years, so they don't, again, like you mentioned earlier, just fall in love with the mask and then suddenly realize, okay, this isn't the person that I fell in love with. But ease them into it. Kind of let little things out slowly, like explaining, I need 10 minutes before I can talk about this, or I'm not mad, I'm just overwhelmed. And those are two different things. Things like that. Or I need to take a walk for a little bit.
Yeah, or I have sensory issues and I need you to understand them. Like that can cause me to have issues during random times. So if I come in and your cooking happens to have smell a certain way and I'm just like, oh my God, like please don't freak out. I'm just having a sensory thing. And I think that's been one of my biggest struggles whenever it comes to this, because the thing that a lot of people need to understand is that relationships are supposed to be the one place you don't have to perform. You know, I should be able to explain to my wife that I'm dealing with some sensory issues and that her cooking is messing with me, so I'm going to go take a walk for a little bit. It's not anything to do with her cooking. Her cooking, by the way, my wife's cooking is absolutely delicious, but
Oh, mine
sometimes
too.
like a certain smell is just not working for me on that day, and I just have to take a walk. We're saying all this because everybody just needs to understand, like, if you're struggling with masking in a relationship that you're in, start working on developing the communication to start letting the person that you're with know more about who you are fundamentally and as a person who deals with neurodivergence.
Yeah. And you talking about like the sensory stuff and your wife's cooking and everything, that's a real issue for my son. And, if she's cooking something that smells strong or whatever, he could, and he is not agreeing with it, it could go into full meltdown mode. And so if I was to just mask that, that would teach him that he has to mask, and then he's not being who he really is. And so when we mask, we're unconsciously teaching our kids to mask. You
Yeah.
know, stop fidgeting, sit still, look people in the eye, don't express emotion.
Be a man.
Be a man. We're passing down those same survival strategies that we had that ultimately have cost us in the long run.
Yeah. And I think, especially with boys, this is one of those lessons I had to learn with my first son, that I had these expectations that my father instilled in me, right? Boys are supposed to be tough and competitive and in control, and you're supposed to play football, or you're supposed to be a wrestler, or let's go hunting. Like that's, I mean, that's legitimately the lesson I learned from my father. But my son was really expressive and he was really emotional about certain things in a lot of different ways. And I messed up, I messed up a lot with him because I was still struggling with that internalized expectation that I'd built up as growing up. And when he was dealing with executive function issues and struggling, like I remember a lot of people were just kind of labeling him as just a problem before we really even delved into what was actually going on. And I think whenever we found out that he had ADHD and autism, that like that really opened up my eyes. I mean, it's legitimately the reason why I started looking into it for myself, was because of what I was reading for him. And I think that we really need to understand that success with children isn't compliance. When we're forcing that compliance under our kids, they're going to learn the I'm fine, you know, especially like, hey, school was fine, right? Because we're not teaching them to be able to talk about their feelings and their emotions around things in healthy ways. And they're exhausting themselves performing a version of, I'm okay for the adults around them.
Which, I'm going to add in, I think it's really important that we get away from just asking generic questions like that. I think it's really important that we ask some specific questions. But you talk about with that for boys, but honestly, it affects girls too, because girls have so many societal expectations and everything that they end up turning their masking into perfectionism. And that's kind of what happened for my daughter. We didn't know it at the time, but she had autism and ADHD as well. And All her expectations turned into perfectionism to the point where if she got a B on something, she was beating herself up. And that was never an expectation that my wife and I ever had for her. We just wanted her to do her best. But she got into this expectation that she had to have straight A's. And that perfectionism turned into massive anxiety that also turned into extra sensory issues to a point where, like, she couldn't be touched by other people walking down the hallways. And it became a massive thing. So having those expectations for girls of be polite, be organized, be easygoing, that can just turn into a whole other host of issues for them.
Yeah. Like we were talking about like the be a man with the boys and things like that. A lot of gender stereotypes for girls is like if they're too emotional, that she's being dramatic. Can't keep up socially. Oh, must be sensitive. They struggling with like their regulation. She's a handful. Like girls get diagnosed a lot later because their masking looks like compliance in a social construct. And by the time anyone really actually even notices, the mask is fused on and she's the good girl. And that's what really surprises a lot of people whenever they get older and they start learning to be more themselves. Again, we've taught our kids to mask, and that when people do become the truth about who they are, it's going to cause a lot of social issues because the people around them legitimately are friends with or fell in love with that mask. I think the hardest question that a lot of us as parents need to sit with is like, are we helping our kids navigate the world, or are we teaching them to hide who they are because we never learned the difference?
So if we're teaching our kids to mask without realizing it, how do we stop? How do we actually teach them differently? Because knowing the problem isn't enough. We need to talk about what being authentic actually looks like in practice.
I mean, first we got to stop with like being the rock. What we really need to be is just be a person. Like our kids do not need us to be some like monolithic, unshakable structure. They need the real me, right? I want my kids to see that even though I'm dealing with all these different things, I'm still able to be a dad. I'm still able to be fun. I'm still able to be the person that they need me to be in all the ways that really matter.
Yeah, and I mean, we also need to name what's happening to us when we're struggling. You know, dad's brain's having a loud day, so I need a few minutes to reset. That one teaches our kids more about emotional regulation than just I'm fine. And I want to actually talk about when I come home after a long day, there's a lot of times that my son wants to just jump in and start playing right away. And there's a lot of times where I have to tell him, buddy, daddy just needs a few minutes to cool down and stare at his phone for a little bit, and then I can jump in and play. But that teaches him that it's okay to take some time for himself.
Yeah, because you're not dumping your problem on him, right? You're modeling the behavior that you need. Like you're struggling, you need a little bit of time to yourself. This is kind of what we talked about in the after school restraint and collapse episode, where like, hey, this is going on. I need some time to rest and relax. We're modeling the behavior. I mean, there's a big difference between like oversharing and being age appropriate honest, which is what you were doing. When we show them how to work with our brains instead of against them, you're honestly handing them the blueprint for working with theirs.
And when we don't name what's going on, their brains are going to fill in the blanks and they're going to come up with the worst case scenario.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it also kind of goes into the thing like where a lot of things that as men we get told are soft, right? Sadness, fear, frustration, feeling overwhelmed. Like, those are soft feelings. Like, weak people feel those feelings. But the thing is, these aren't soft, they're human. And honestly, we need to really start treating them that way in front of all of our kids.
And when the only emotion that we show is anger or that stoic calm, those other emotions don't disappear. They just come out when we don't want them to, and in ways that we don't want them to.
And they are definitely going to come out sideways. They're going to be irritability, withdrawal. We're going to be blowing up about the small stuff. Like, the emotions are still there. They're just going to come out uglier. I think about RSD in this realm, like, because it doesn't care about gender expectations, and sensory overload doesn't give a fuck. Like, we have to stop white knuckling through all of these different issues that we deal with. We have to name them, like you said. I'm feeling really rejected right now, and my brain is making this bigger than it is. Like, having that conversation, especially with your spouse, and your kids seeing that you're struggling, but you're still communicating with her about something that you're struggling with, they're going to start learning that, and they're going to start taking it into their conversations with their friends. Hey, this is really bothering me. I need you to stop, please. Or, hey, I need a few minutes. I've got to go get myself regulated. Like, when we actually explain and express these things in real life, in real situations, our kids will start learning that. And that's the goal, is to teach our kids that emotions are information. They're not flaws. And we do this by honestly showing them.
And part of showing them is also showing them that masking isn't necessarily always bad. I know that goes counter to what we've been talking about, but it's also a survival skill. And sometimes survival skills are exactly what the situation calls for in the real world. Whether it be job interviews, conferences like parent-teacher conferences, or interactions with the people that don't need your full backstory. There's situations where strategic masking helps us function in a world that wasn't designed for our brains, right?
Yeah, because like, the key word here is strategic. Like, not everybody needs to know that I have sensory issues. However, sometimes I may explain to people, like, hey, you may see my hands do this weird twitch tick thing I have where my right hand goes over my shoulder. I'll say that to people in any kind of social situation because it's a good thing to kind of talk about. But I'm not going to do that in every situation. That's a conversation I have whenever, like, it's people I know or I'm doing a talk and I'm wanting to highlight it. It needs to serve a goal. And this is different from masking 24/7 because you're terrified of being seen. You're explaining and expressing the authentic you and what people are going to experience with you in a way that makes sense when it's relevant, not because you're doing it out of fear.
Yeah, masking, it becomes a problem when you can't turn it off. When you've been doing it for so long, you don't know who you are underneath, and you have to become someone that you're not. And also when it becomes draining. I mean, when the energy cost is destroying your health and relationships, and you're finding that even at the end of every day, you're just dead to the world.
Yeah, because masking requires energy. You're cataloging every person around you's expectation, and you're creating that expectation. That may not even be what their expectation really is of you, but you've created it in your mind, and that's taking you mental energy. It's why so many people who are neurodivergent talk about how their social battery is so drained, is because they mask when it's not necessary to do so. The goal isn't to eliminate masking, it's to make a conscious choice instead of a default setting. Know when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and what it's costing you. Like, when I do public speaking, I deal with a lot of different issues whenever I'm up on that stage. And I know that I'm going to need some time beforehand and after to recover. I'm making a conscious effort and decision in that moment that, yeah, I'm going to go on stage in front of a dozen people or 100 people or 1,000 people. And I know I'm going to deal with whatever comes afterwards. And it means my battery is going to be depleted. I made that decision and I want to because I enjoy public speaking. When you do that, you're teaching the people around you Sometimes we just adjust how we present ourselves to other people because we just want to be heard, and we want people to get the message of what we're saying and not get distracted by our mannerisms and things like that can be confusing for people. We should never be having to hide who we are from the people who matter.
Yeah. But being authentic doesn't mean that it doesn't give us a license to just go out and be a jerk. Let's be clear about that. It's not about dropping every single filter that we have. It's about being who we are while also being kind. And it's about accepting that it's okay to not just be stoic all the time, right? It's okay to like art, to be creative, and to feel our feelings and to express them however it looks for us individually. And it's about acknowledging that our brain works differently, and that's okay. That doesn't mean we're broken. It means we're us and we're unique.
So let that freak flag fly. Yeah, it may alienate some people at first, but the ones who stick around, the ones that you find along the way, those are your people. These are the ones that are actually going to care about the real you, not a version of you that's easier for them to be around. And those are the only relationships worth having, anyways. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate all of y'all.
Yep. So make sure and like, subscribe, comment, follow us, click all the things, and continue being your unique selves. See you next time, everybody.